Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I'm calling the SIBILANT SEDUCER. If you want to step forth from the shadows and with a gesture leave your enemies running in fear or kneeling in awe at your feet, and if you want to know that the minds of mortals are your plaything, and with a single word you can set your enemies running away, or worse for them, towards you, then this is the build for you. This character gets amazing crowd control and supporting abilities and makes an excellent leader for a party, and you also get some of the most powerful defensive abilities in the entire game. Doing it all in true style, using some of the least used subclasses in the game, perhaps all the better to conceal your true power. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Eduardo Franco for the €2 donation, Tarantula for the $5, Friedrich Nordland for the 500 kroner, and Notorious Zig for the $10, as well as Papei and Gonzalo Mena Fuenzalida for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. Apologies if I butchered any of your names, but I really do appreciate it. It really means so much to me. Alright, let's ascend to glory. I'm using Shadowheart as the example character here because, I mean, come on, I know my viewership demographics, and with a build name like that, no one would accept a different character. But I also think that this character is extremely flavorful for evil Shadowheart, even though we aren't using cleric levels, or even good Shadowheart, depending on the spin that you want to put on these abilities. I've, of course, put a little bit of an eviler cast on them while discussing them, but you don't have to interpret the build that way. I think this build also makes an excellent Dark Urge build from a flavor perspective, even though we aren't directly inflicting violence. A character whose mad whispers are driving the others around them insane as much as them is a great interpretation, I think, of the Dark Urge. So a lot of flavorful choices for building this as your main character as well. If you are building it as a custom character, then for race, I would recommend one of the races that gets shield proficiency or medium armor proficiency. We don't naturally get those from our levels, and so that will be a significant improvement to the character overall. So something like half drow will get you extra casts of darkness, as well as the ability to use shields. Githyanki makes you significantly better at being a party face, and also gives you Misty Step once per day, which is extremely useful as well. So one of those two would be my picks, as well as the normally powerful options like Halfling, Dweogar to pop out of invisibility and do all of the things that we already talked about, or half Wood Elf, which gets shield proficiency and extra movement speed. At first level, we're going to be starting with a level of Warlock. It actually doesn't matter that much if you start with Warlock or Bard, so if you prefer to start as a Bard, you can do so without damaging the build too much. But Warlock does give us a couple very minor advantages. Firstly, if you're building this character from first level, then Warlocks will have a very slightly easier time on the Nautiloid, which can be relevant. But more importantly, Warlocks get Wisdom saving throw proficiency, whereas Bards get Dexterity saving throw proficiency, and Wisdom saves are generally going to be more useful, so we prefer to start as a Warlock. For our cantrip selections here, you are going to take Eldritch Blast, like every Warlock before you, just the best damaging cantrip in the game, and makes this character a very reliable damage dealer alongside of our great crowd control abilities. And we're also going to take Booming Blade. One of the things that I love about this character is that we get to radically change our play pattern over the course of the game. So you get to keep the character feeling fresh and fun all the way through the game. And one option that we have is to become a melee monster in the late game as we really come into our power. Right around the time when you get the Resonant Stone, this character can take Pact of the Blade and Shadow Blade and then have Booming Blade and start dishing out tremendous amounts of melee damage with the normal Resonant Stone combo. And having Booming Blade just gives us that option, as well as being pretty powerful even before we get that combination online, just for extra damage if you ever do make a melee attack. If you know you're never gonna melee, you can take Minor Illusion, or Friends, or Bone Chill, any of those, but I really like having Booming Blade so that we have that option. For our subclass, we're going to take one that you almost never see recommended in character optimization builds, but that is incredible for this build, the Archfey. Not only does this come with a really solid spell list and one of the best defensive abilities in the game that we will get near the end game, we also get an extremely powerful early game tool in the form of Fey Presence. This is actually the best crowd control in the game at first level. It's an AoE Frighten, which will just end combat outright. A lot of enemies in the early game have very poor wisdom saves, so this huge area of effect crowd control ability can just win encounters in a single button press, and it's available on a short rest, so you can use it in pretty much every encounter. Now, obviously, it's a 10-foot radius, and it's from the caster, so it requires you to be a little careful using it, since you don't want to wander into melee with your squishy characters unless you have a plan to get them back out. But this ability is so powerful that it's worth the risk, because you can win encounters outright with it. Then in the late game, we can use the charm version of this to set up irresistible commands from Mantle of Majesty. So not only can this win us the early game, it's also extremely synergistic with this character's plan all the way throughout the game, letting us use some of the most powerful crowd control abilities in the game much, much more effectively. For our spell selection, we're going to be taking Hex, of course, because it goes with Eldritch Blast to just make us a powerful damage dealer whenever we want to do damage at long range. And for our second spell, we have a couple different options. Sleep is always good in the early game and can be even more early game crowd control. Also very thematic, I think, for an Archfey Warlock. You can take Hellish Rebuke, because this character will sometimes get up into melee. We'll have Glamour Bard temp HP to make us a little tankier, so you can deal a little damage back to enemies using this, but I recommend just taking Armor of Agathys. It's a very powerful defensive tool, and this character will mostly be using its temp HP bonuses on its allies, so the Armor of Agathys gives you some defensive stats as well in order to keep you alive, so you can use your more powerful abilities. Then, for our ability selection, we're going to be taking 16 Charisma, of course, to boost our save DCs as much as possible and make us a better party face, 14 in Constitution and 16 in Dexterity for Initiative and Armor class when we're in light armor, and 12 Wisdom to maximize our Wisdom saves so that we don't fall afoul of hostile magic. Very standard attribute split for a Charisma-based caster, and just the natural one that we're going to be using. If you are using Ethel's Hair, this character can benefit from taking 17 Charisma, and then you would take 10 Wisdom, part of why we want Wisdom save proficiency. Then you put Ethel's Hair in Charisma and get to 18 Charisma, and then that will get you an extra feat. For your skill selection here, I recommend just taking the dialogue skills. Of course, this is a charisma-based character, and so can be your party face very easily. If you have a background that gives you persuasion, then we can spend our Bard skill on Sleight of Hand and also be the lock picker. Otherwise, we'll probably spend that on Persuasion because it's the most important of the dialogue skills, and will make this character the best party face possible. Outside of those dialogue skills, you can also put them into the intelligence skills if you want to be better at those, but mostly you just want to make sure you're making the important dialogue checks. Alright, that's all that we have to do at level 1. Let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're going to be immediately leaving Warlock and taking levels of Bard. Now, you can take a second level of Warlock here if you want Agonizing Blast, and if you're going to be a Darkness-focused party. So if your party is using a lot of Darkness casts, getting the second Warlock level gets you the ability to see through magical darkness, which could be pretty useful, but I want to get the Bard abilities online and working as soon as possible, so we're going to get our Bard levels early. For your cantrip selection here, you can take more utility cantrips. Friends will, of course, make us a significantly better party face, and Minor Illusion is especially good for this character. You can group enemies around it and then run in and use your Archfey Presence in order to immediately end encounters with a bunch of clustered enemies, so that you can just lock them all down at once. So I recommend picking up both of those. Of course, you can also grab Vicious Mockery if you just can't imagine leaving home without it, and I certainly wouldn't blame you. For your spell selection here, we're going to be taking Dissonant Whispers, an ability, of course, that can fear enemies, just an incredibly powerful combat tool, which bards should always take. Just locks down one melee enemy for 2 turns with no concentration and prevents them from acting at all, and Healing Word will let us support our allies extremely well. Those are mandatory for our other spells. You have a couple more options. If your party doesn't have access to Longstrider otherwise, then I recommend picking that up, of course, because you should have it somewhere in your party for sure. If they do have it, then you can pick up Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which is, again, very powerful crowd control, and even in the late game can lock down some bosses that are otherwise immune to most crowd control. And I like Heroism for the early game. It gives fear immunity, and 5 temp HP is 5 healing a turn for longer fights. Those will mostly happen in the early game, so Heroism is actually very useful in early game scenarios, though you can swap this out for something else like a Disguise Self or Speak with Animals if you want something along those lines, or Thunderwave to push enemies away. We also, of course, get to add a skill, and if you don't have Persuasion from your background, you're definitely going to want to pick that up. Otherwise, you can put it into Sleight of Hand and make this character good at lockpicking or stealth if you want them to hide and do all their charming and insidious whispering from the shadows. Both of those are great options also. And then, of course, as a bard, you need to pick the right starting instrument or you're going to ruin your build completely, so make sure you get this one right as we move on to level 3. At character level 3, we're taking our second level of Bard, which gets us a few things. Jack of all trades, of course, makes us even better at being a party face. Now, even with low intelligence, we can sometimes make the history or religion checks that we might want to make in those dialogues. And Song of Rest gives us extra Warlock spell slots, which is awesome, and extra uses of Fey Presence, which is even more awesome. So this character enables its most powerful abilities to be cast even more often. For our spell selection, at this point, you should know what your party is missing. A good default here, if you have Longstrider elsewhere in the party, is to take Thunderwave. Sometimes you'll want enemies just to go away, and you won't have a cast of Fey Presence, so this can be useful for that. Or they might have lower con save than Wisdom save. Or you can just take another utility spell, but Thunderwave is a good combat spell, so here we're going to grab that. At character level 3, or character level 4, Bard level 3, we get to choose our subclass. And I've already mentioned what the subclass is going to be. We're going to choose the Glamour Bard. This gives us Mantle of Inspiration, which lets us give 2 allies 5 temp HP, and then if an enemy hits them, they become charmed. Now, this in and of itself isn't that powerful at this level, though the 5 temp HP on 2 allies every short rest, that adds up to a lot of temp HP over the course of a day. We get 4 uses of this per day, so that's 40 extra HP for our party, which does add up. But will be extremely useful at later levels, especially. When you can charm an enemy with no saving throw, and this ability allows no saving throws, you can then land Mantle of Majesty Command on them with no saving throw, once we unlock that ability. And you can set that up by having your allies deliberately provoke an attack of opportunity. So the enemy hits them, they get charmed, then you hit them with a command, and they can no longer act for the rest of the combat. Another great option with Mantle of Inspiration here is that this is a bonus action, so you can refresh it during combat. This character will have some uses for its bonus actions, but sometimes you'll just have a spare action to spend on this, and this is a great in-combat healing ability, so don't neglect to use this to top up allies' hit points as they're getting low. Finally, important to mention about this ability that when an enemy gets charmed by it, the target that counts as charming them, so they can't attack that target, is the person who had the Mantle of Inspiration on them. So it'll be your ally who charms them. That means that characters that attack multiple times are going to have to choose a different target for their second attack, which means that they will often skip part of their turn, especially late-game bosses, so very powerful against those types of characters as well. Don't underestimate how good this ability is. We also, of course, get level 2 spells, and our level 2 spells give us a lot of options, though I will always recommend taking Cloud of Daggers. It's just the best damage spell at this level, and again, can just win some encounters outright. Very, very powerful. For our replacement spell, we will probably swap out one of these earlier game utility spells. You're unlikely to be concentrating on Heroism as much now, and the temp HP from Heroism conflict with the College of Glamour, so I recommend swapping that out. And you can pick up something like Hold Person for more lockdown, Invisibility for out-of-combat utility, or Heat Metal, which is very, very good in some encounters, but Hold Person, I think, has generally the most utility. This character also wants melee allies who benefit from the automatic critical hits from Hold Person, so very synergistic there as well. We also get Expertise in 2 skills. So we are going to, of course, put those into Persuasion and one other skill. If you are the party's lockpicker, you'll want to put it into Sleight of Hand. Otherwise, pick one of your other skills, Insight or Deception. Get rolled pretty awesome, often. Get rolled pretty awesome. So those make great choices. At character level 5, we're going to be taking our 4th level of Bard and getting a bunch of extra bonuses. Firstly, we get a cantrip, and for our cantrip selection here, I recommend Blade Ward. This character has Armor of Agathis, and there will be times when you just kind of want to pass the turn and maintain concentration on a spell, and you'll have a choice between using an Eldritch Blast or just using a defensive ability like Blade Ward. Having damage resistance combined with Armor of Agathis extends the duration of Armor of Agathis. If you self-cast the Glamour Bard HP, it can double that as well. So it's a very useful ability to have and gives you a lot of defensive options. And then we get another spell. Here, I would recommend taking a utility spell, something that your party doesn't currently have easy access to. For combat spells, Crown of Madness or Heat Metal are both good options, but you can also take Enhanceability or Invisibility. Either of those are very, very useful outside of combat. I'm going to recommend Invisibility because having more casts of this can just give you a lot of options. If an ally gets in trouble, you can make them invisible and get them out of it, or for yourself as well. And then for our feat, we're going to take Alert. For this character, you're either going to use Ethel's Hair to boost your Charisma, or Charisma Gear, or Story Event in order to hit 20 Charisma. The Birthright Hat is perfect on this character, so you don't need to worry about hitting 20 Charisma, although if you are using Ethel's Hair to do that, then you get to have slightly higher save DCs and damage, but Alert is just too important. This character's all about crowd controlling enemies before they can act, and being able to go first and enable that to happen matters a lot. You also want to coordinate your turns with your allies. More than pretty much any other party, this character benefits from having the same initiative as allies, and the easiest way to do that is to have all of your characters go first. That way you can have an ally trigger an attack of opportunity, swap to this character and use Mantle of Majesty command, and command the enemy without a saving throw before their turn ever happens. So very important to go first on this character. Don't leave home without Alert. It's the best feat in the game for a reason. At character level 6, we get to take our 5th level of Bard here, and take Font of Inspiration, which of course is incredible for this character. As a Glamour Bard, we're going to be passing out tons of temporary hit points, so being able to do that using our Inspiration dice, returning on a short rest cooldown, means that we get hundreds of extra hit points for our party over the course of the day. So obviously very, very powerful there. And of course, we also get the natural power spike of every spellcaster and get access to 3rd level spells, which are always where your characters hit an enormous power spike because these are some of the best combat spells in the game. We're going to be taking Hypnotic Pattern so that we again have encounter-winning crowd control at our fingertips and can lock down huge groups of enemies easily with that. And we're also going to replace one of our earlier spells. There's a few options here, but I recommend replacing Thunder Wave at this point. You have your Archfey abilities if enemies do get close, and you're much less concerned about that at this point in the game, so you can replace Thunder Wave for another non-concentration combat spell in the form of Glyph of Warding, which is a great damage spell and excellent crowd control as well, and doesn't require your concentration, so just one of the best spells in the game, great for every bard. At character level 7, we're going to take our 6th level of Bard, getting access to probably the single strongest crowd control tool in the game, Mantle of Majesty Command. This ability has no saving throw against an enemy who's charmed, and is command, which just locks down an enemy completely, and can be cast as a bonus action every turn for 10 turns when you activate it. In any fight where there's one powerful enemy, this is kind of an auto win button. Have an ally with your Mantle of Inspiration on them. They provoke an attack of opportunity from that enemy to get the charm on them, no saving throw there. And then you Mantle of Majesty command them, no saving throw there, and they're locked down permanently because you can keep recasting this. This also synergizes really well with our Archfey abilities. Walk into the middle of a group of enemies, charm all of them, command the most dangerous one, and then the others can't break your concentration because they're charmed and unable to attack you. So they have to target your allies, but you get to keep the enemy locked down using Mantle of Majesty. An absurdly powerful tool. It also works against things that command doesn't normally work against, like undead enemies. So will let you just auto-win some of the most difficult fights in the game using this ability. We get another spell as well, and I'm going to recommend taking Plant Growth. Plant Growth is non-concentration, a really powerful crowd control ability, and works extremely well with other sources of AoE effects, such as Hunger of Hadar, that we're going to get later from this character, or any other effect like that, Cloud Kill, anything that you can keep on an enemy in order to lock them to use Plant Growth to lock them inside a hazardous effect. Again, this character's all about finding ways to just push a button and win an encounter. Plant Growth with quartering enemy movement speed can do that very easily. It's also, of course, not mentioned anywhere in the level up screen, but when you hit level 6 Glamour Bard, your Mantle of Inspiration also levels up, and allows you to target 3 creatures for 8 temp HP instead of the previous 2 for 5 temp HP. So every single inspiration die that you spend gives your team 24 temporary HP, which means multiple hundreds of temp HP every long rest. A ridiculous amount of damage mitigation, in addition to the free crowd control that it gives you and the turn interrupts that it will do to enemies that are taking multiple attacks in a turn. So very, very powerful to hit level 6. Glamour Bard makes us better at defending our allies and much better at oppressing our foes. Then, at character level 8, we've gotten everything that we want from Glamour Bard. Now, we could take 10 Bard and 2 Warlock. That would be a totally reasonable way to build the character as well. But one of the great things about Archfey Warlock is the powerful defensive capabilities that they get at later levels. So we're going to take some more Warlock levels in order to unlock those. That means we're taking our 2nd level of Warlock here, which gets us another spell. There aren't that many that we're particularly interested at this point. You can take Hellish Rebuke, you might use it sometimes. You can take Expeditious Retreat, but you probably are not going to be using whatever Warlock spell you unlock too frequently. But more importantly, we get some Eldritch Invocations. We get Agonizing Blast, which increases our damage capabilities with our Eldritch Blast. It was okay up to this point, but more of a backup tool, and now becomes a really strong primary damaging source. And of course we get Devil's Sight. This is going to let us abuse Darkness, which we're going to unlock at the next level, or already have if we're a half-drow, like I recommended in the race section, or if our allies can cast it. And Darkness is, again, one of the most powerful defensive tools in Baldur's Gate 3, giving you complete immunity to enemy ranged attacks if they can't see into it, and giving melee enemies disadvantage and you advantage. Then, at Warlock level 3, we get to choose our Pact boon. The Pact boon that we're going to take is the Pact of the Blade. Now, you can take Chain or Tome, and it'll be totally fine. Tome gets you Vicious Mockery, Guidance, and Thorn Whip, which lets you really manipulate enemies around the battlefield, and is also very on theme and very funny. These cantrips will be very, very useful for hauling enemies through your hazardous areas with Thorn Whip, mocking them, which is always hilarious, and Guidance is still always good. And Pact of the Chain does give you a pretty powerful tool even this late in the game, though it has fallen off a little bit in utility. But Pact of the Blade just lets us attack using our charisma, and because we're now a 3rd level Warlock, we can unlock Shadowblade with one of our Warlock spells, bind it as our Pact weapon, and attack using our charisma. So we will be able to deal massive amounts of damage with the Shadowblade, and that's still an extremely powerful thing to be doing even at these later levels, especially because around level 9 is when you're probably going to have the Resonant Stone available, so you can double the damage of the Shadowblade. So suddenly we get to be an incredibly dangerous melee threat with Shadowblade, Resonant Stone, and Booming Blade, in addition to all of the crowd control that we're doing. I really like to think of this as if we are playing a Dark Urge, as like their powers kicking in. If you're playing this as Shadowheart, then this can coincide with her acceptance of becoming a Dark Justiciar, so it fits really well flavor-wise with the story beats that are probably going on in the game at the time, and I really like the way that this character transforms as you hit high levels, because you can become a devastating melee combatant in addition to all the things you're already doing. We also get to replace one of our low-level spells, so let's go ahead and replace whatever trash spell we took at the previous level and get a better level 2 spell, which of course is going to be Darkness. Obviously, for a Warlock, this is basically a mandatory pick and gives you a huge amount of capabilities. Like I said, best defensive tool in the game. Then, at character level 10, we're taking our 4th level of Warlock, and we're getting a cantrip, which of course is going to be True Strike, to drive people berserk in the YouTube comments. Honestly, this never fails to drive someone bananas when I take True Strike. I keep thinking this is going to stop working, and it never does. So, it's just so great every time. And then we get another spell here, and we're going to take Misty Step. Obviously, still an extremely powerful mobility tool, even if you get it somewhat late, and this will let us pass off a Misty Step item to another character that might not have easy access to it. Even in the late game, you still want this extra mobility. We also get another feat, and the feat that we're going to take is an ability improvement to boost our charisma. We will have used story events or items to boost our charisma as well, so we should have 20 around this point, and our save DCs will be excellent. Enemies will not be able to resist most of our spells, alongside the save DC gear that we're of course going to be equipping this character with. At character level 11, we get to take our 5th level of Warlock and get extra attack with our Pact of the Blade weapon. So now we're a very powerful Resonant Stone Shadow Blade wielder if we want to be. We can't cast it at the maximum level. We don't have the 5th level spell slot for it, but it's still an incredibly dangerous tool even when you only spend a 3rd level spell slot on it, which now we can use one of our Warlock slots for as well. So obviously this gives us a devastating melee attack, and we get 3rd level Warlock spells, which give us a couple great options also. We get to take Hunger of Hadar, which is just still a game-winning button, especially in combination with Plant Growth. So if you cast Plant Growth and then have Hunger of Hadar overlaid on top of it, enemies can't jump out of it because they're blinded. And you can do these both in one turn with a haste from an ally or a potion of speed or something, and that will just shut down entire encounters. And we're going to replace one of our low-level spells as well. At this point, we're very rarely going to be concentrating on Hex, so we'll replace that alongside to pick up Counterspell, even though we're only going to get 3rd level spell slots on this character, because the Warlock and Bard spell slots don't stack. 3rd level Counterspell is still very useful even in the late game. It can let you turn off some pretty dangerous crowd control spells, especially from some late game bosses. We also get an Eldritch Invocation here, and we're going to take Repelling Blast, letting us push enemies backwards into our crowd control abilities, like the aforementioned Hunger of Hadar Plant Growth combination, so we have even more control over enemies' movement and activities on the battlefield. You could also take Armor of Shadows, but I suggest getting a scroll or an ally to cast Mage Armor instead, rather than bothering with Armor of Shadows. Repelling Blast is something you can't get elsewhere, whereas Armor of Shadows you can. And then finally, at character level 12, we get to take our 6th level of Archfey Warlock and get another ability that is just incredible, but that rarely gets talked about because this is the most sort of overshadowed Warlock subclass, Misty Escape. Misty Escape lets you become invisible whenever you take damage, and then on your next turn you get a free Misty Step, which does break your invisibility, but doesn't break your concentration on spells. You're going to see some false information online about this, because I think before patch like 2 or 3, it used to break your concentration, but now it does not. So you can concentrate on Mantle of Majesty while Misty Escaping, meaning that it's extremely difficult for enemies to break your concentration on Mantle of Majesty, on Hypnotic Pattern, on Hunger of Hadar, on any of the game-winning concentration effects that this character has. Being invisible is one of the most potent defensive capabilities in the game, because enemies will waste their actions looking for you or just have to change targets. And this character, being a Glamour Bard and an Archfey Warlock, enemies are just going to be changing targets a lot, which will really mess up their ability to focus down important targets or behave at all tactically. And the AI isn't great at that already, so it really screws up the enemies and gives you a massive tactical advantage and strategic advantage in combat. We also get an additional spell, and there's a lot of options here. You can go back for any utility spell. I like picking up Fear. There are some fights where Fear is better than Hypnotic Pattern, or if you want to focus more on damage, you can pick up Hex again, because you can still concentrate on Hex if you want to be taking a more damaging role in a given fight as well. But Fear, because it's a cone, and there are some enemies that will be better served by hitting them with Fear, it gives you yet another powerful crowd control option, but this spell you can kind of play around with. Alright, my friends, that's the build, and I hope that all will love it and despair. But of course, we can make this character even stronger with appropriate items, so let's get to that. For items for this character, we pretty much care about only two things from our items: spell save DC and initiative. This character has alert and 16 dexterity, so we have +8 initiative by default, which is almost enough to go before even the fastest enemies in honor mode, but if we pick up a couple extra points of initiative from our gear, then we can guarantee going first in combat, which will allow us to win those fights before they ever start. Spell save DCs obviously will help us lock down enemies more effectively with all of our crowd control, which obviously is what this character is designed to do, so we want to boost those as much as possible. In addition to those two things, we're going to add some defensive gear to make us harder to take down and make it harder to interrupt our concentration. And then we can add a few extra things that maybe improve our damage as well, just in order to round out the character. So firstly, we're almost always going to be wearing the Birthright hat. Charisma is so good on this character. Even if you took Ethel's hair, started with 17 charisma, and have 20 charisma at this point, going up to 22 with Birthright means that you are wildly better at doing all the things that this character does. You do more damage with Eldritch Blast, you crowd control enemies better, you do more damage with Booming Blade, with the Potent Robes, and you do more, you're better at all dialogue skills, so charisma is just super important. You're almost always going to be wearing that. An alternative is the Fistbreaker Helm, or another item that gives you plus save DC, but better just to get that from charisma, I think, in general, though the Fistbreaker Helm is, of course, always good. In addition to that, we just want items that increase our spell save DC, like the Amulet of the Devout, or if we have shield proficiency like Ketheric's Shield. These items will boost our save DCs to the point where enemies can't easily resist our spells, or our Mantle of Majesties, because don't forget, you can use Mantle of Majesty on non-charmed enemies. Obviously, there are ways to make it have no saving throw, but if they fail the saving throw against command, they still just lose the fight. So boosting your save DCs matters a lot. We also will want a weapon that boosts our save DC, a staff. The best one, of course, is Markahesh gear. You might have a sorcerer or something that wants this more, but any staff that boosts your save DC is totally reasonable for this character. Markahesh gear just gives you another damage option. If you set it to lightning, you can use the chain lightning and blow up smaller enemies while you lock down the big ones with your bonus action Mantle of Majesty command. Other than that, we want to boost our defensive capabilities. So we want items like the Ring of Protection, Evasive Shoes, and Cloak of Protection that give us higher saving throws, helping us maintain concentration on our spells, and higher armor class, preserving our hit points, and also making it so enemies are less likely to attack us. Typically, this character wants to try to direct enemy attention to its allies, because they will have Mantle of Inspiration hit points on them, and then that'll charm that enemy, who then won't be able to do anything else. You especially play well with Barbarian allies who have Reckless Attack to draw aggro themselves, so if you raise your own AC and reduce your allies' AC, you're more likely to have enemies attack those allies, and thus more likely to get the charm effects more consistently, so AC gear is really good for us. We also do not want to drop concentration on any of our spells, and we don't want to die, so like pretty much every other caster, the Amulet of Greater Health is an incredible choice. It can replace the Amulet of the Devout if you have this on a different character, or you can use this use the Devout Amulet and use the Amulet of Greater Health on someone else, but either way, you're going to be very happy with one of these two. The Amulet of Greater Health boosts our hit points up to a very high value, and also makes it much more difficult for enemies to drop our concentration, because it sets our con saves really high and gives us advantage. For our armor, this character only has light armor proficiency, so you're probably going to be in a robe, and you basically have two choices. Either you can use the potent robe if you took the story path that provides this, though if you're playing a more evil character, maybe you might not have. But as with any warlock, the potent robe is going to be best in slot, dealing additional damage with your Eldritch Blasts equal to your Charisma on each beam, so massively improving your damage output, and also giving you additional AC and temp HP. Conflicts somewhat with Armor of Agathis, but still a very, very powerful tool. If you don't have the potent robe, you're just looking for any robe that gives you additional spell save DC, like the Robe of the Weave, which gives you extra armor class and spell save DC, and then of course you're going to combine either of those with Scrolls of Mage Armor or Mage Armor cast from an ally in order to make sure that you have reasonable armor class. This character can still maintain decent armor class with AC items, even in robes, so you should be able to direct enemy attention away from you, and if you do get hit, you're moderately tanky with the temp HP and decent hit point values, so you should be able to shrug off a small amount of damage. Obviously, you're not winning any prizes for wading into huge amounts of enemies and living to tell the tale, but this character is a little more resilient than they look on the surface. Finally, one other item that I wanted to mention, just because it's really on theme for the character, is the Nymph Cloak. Not because it's particularly good, but just because Dominate Person fits the theme so well, and this item doesn't get any love, though, of course, if you use it, you need to make sure to provide appropriate aftercare. Finally, of course, I should mention that the other weapon that we can use, in addition to save DC boosting staffs, is the Shadowblade. Shadowblade is one of the most broken things in Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 8 when combined with the Resonant Stone. The 3d8 psychic damage that you can deal when you upcast it with a level 3 spell slot, it lasts all day, it doesn't take concentration, can then be doubled with the Resonant Stone. You can add Booming Blade to that and just wipe the floor with enemies in melee combat, because remember, we're a Pact of the Blade Warlock, so we can use all of these at full capability, and one of the things I love most about this character is you can swap between these setups either between encounters or over the course of the game as story events dictate. It is also worth mentioning that because of that, and the other things that this character does, we're one of the best characters in the game at using Illithid powers, and there's some that you don't normally use that we're really good at using. We get to use even more than the normally powerful ones in extremely excellent ways. Favorable Beginnings and Luck of the Far Realms are of course still always useful, but some of the lesser used Illithid powers are great for this character also. Charm, we have lots of stuff that interacts with Charm, and so a reaction charm for us is extremely powerful. Displace with Repelling Blast works very well when we knock enemies off cliffs and do falling damage, and Ability Drain will work on our melee attacks to reduce enemy charisma. So this character has a lot of different tools that it can use from Illithid powers as well, and makes it one of the best Illithid power users out there. Any character that's both boosting its spell save DC and making melee weapon attacks can benefit from Illithid powers. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Sibilant Seducer, and I hope that you enjoy reigning over your conquered foes as you dominate Honor Mode. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. It helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.